You bought a new game, you're ready to get it to the table, you're excited, you're enthusiastic, but you've got to learn the rules. Are you going to do it the right way? Now let's be honest, there's no preset rule about how you've got to learn games or which way you should do it. But there is some methods that I think are more effective ways to learn a game, to get out the rules, work your way through them, master them, and really get that game to the table much quicker. The most traditional way is to get the rulebook out and simply read through it. And I don't think that's an effective way to learn the game. Yes, you're going to read through the rules, you're going to read through all of the different phases of the game, and you're going to read all the components list and understand everything. But are you going to remember it? And that's the key thing here. I think when you learn games, it's also good to have a physical element to it, so having the game physically on the table in front of you. Now obviously this isn't a rule of thumb, this is my personal opinion, these are how I learn games. I much prefer my method rather than just sitting there reading a rule book, but obviously this may differ from person to person. So in this video we're just going to talk about the best way I think you can learn a board game and get it to the table. So you're probably first wondering, how many different ways can you learn a board game? Well, there is a few different methods. There's a traditional reading the rulebook. There's my preferred method, where I essentially set the game up on the table, learn all of the components, and learn the game from reading the rulebook. You can go online and watch various YouTubers explain the rules and go through all of the phases in great detail. You can watch playthroughs. You can even watch the designer videos where they go into detail about the game. You can even just learn the game on the fly at the table, but this is, in my opinion, by far the worst way to learn a game out of all the options. You should never just put the game on the table and say, let's learn it. And I've done this crime myself in the past. A long time ago, that's how we used to learn games. We'd just put it on the table and we'd spend an entire session learning it. But I think that is the worst method to actually learn the rules for a game. Now there's no set choice in how you approach this. It's realistically the way that's best for you. So, let's discuss my method and why I think it's the best approach. So right off the bat, you've bought a new game, you get a rulebook, you read through the rulebook, you learn all the components, you learn all the phases, and then you try to get the game to the table. Now the problem is, you may have read the component list and know what all those components were at the time when you read the rulebook, but is it going to stick in your mind? Is it going to be retained by your memory? I feel that when you actually physically set the game up whilst you're reading the rulebook, there's a much better retention in your memory where you remember what components are. Ooh, these are the curse cards. Ooh, these are the so-and-so tokens. Whereas if you just read the rulebook, are you really going to remember what all the individual components are? I tend to find that when I set the game physically up on the table, I'm retaining that knowledge much better than if I was to just read the rules. Then you're on to the actual gameplay once setup's complete, so you know all the components, etc. So you've got all the phases of the game. Reading it is easy. Remembering it is harder. So you can read the rulebook and go through each of the phases with ease. Oh yes, it's the prep phase, it's the main phase, it's the cleanup phase. There you go, you've mastered it. But have you actually remembered what you did throughout all of those phases? Reading the book is a completely different ball game to having the game set up on the table and running through a mock turn all by yourself and following the phases through all by yourself. I tend to find that by doing it in that method, where you are physically playing the game, even if you're not playing a proper game, you're just playing a simulated turn. Obviously, if you're learning solo, you're just learning the rules so you can play with your family. Even if you're just doing a simulated turn, you are learning each of the phases and each of the steps within those phases in much better detail than just sitting there and reading the rulebook in one go. And there's going to be a lot more retention in your memory, in my opinion, than if you're just reading it. On top of that, you're actually doing something with your time. Instead of sitting there and just reading the book and going, yep, I read it, I know what I'm doing. At least if you're playing a little mini session, you're actually doing something. You're actually thinking about the game. You're learning how it works. You're learning how the mechanisms work and why things are designed in particular ways, why things need to happen. If you just read it in the book, are you really going to pick up all these nuances and these little things from just one read? Realistically, for me, personally, that's not going to happen. Now, as I said before, I've done this before. I've picked up a rule book and I've read through it with the intention to just learn the rules just from the rule book. But if it's a big game, let's pretend we're talking about bigger games here, and you've got a huge booklet, am I really going to remember all of that? Or is physically doing it in a kind of prep game or practice game a more effective way of retaining that, because I've actually physically done those different steps, those different phases? I understand, I physically move those components about. Oh, I know this is the doom token and this is the attack dice and this is the set cards that I need for that, physically doing it and physically matching those different components in your head, I think is a more effective way to learn a game. Now, of course, there's going to be situations where this doesn't apply. You pick up a small game and there's only about 3 different types of components in it, and it's a 10-minute game. You probably can learn it all from the rulebook. Yeah, you probably don't actually physically need to practice it. But if you're picking up something on the scale of, for example, Dinosaur Island, or you're picking up Mansions of Madness, I think it's a better idea to actually set it up and learn the rules by doing a mock turn, a mock scenario. Just start playing it. You don't even have to play the game to the end. You're not obliged to do that. You're just learning. So as long as you do a turn or two and get the grasps of the core fundamentals of the game, I think that's a much more effective way to learn. So we're on to the other ways you can learn a game. Obviously the default is just sit down and read the rulebook. For me, I think that's probably the second to least effective way to learn. It's a challenging one because remembering, especially if it's a larger game, remembering all of the steps throughout the turns, all of the phases, remembering all of the intricate little mechanics, all of the component names, it can be a lot. It makes it much easier to follow my preferred method. The other method is following people on YouTube, watching a learn how to play video. And I've done this before myself, especially we tend to gravitate towards those when we get stuck on certain parts of the game. When we can't learn it ourselves, we tend to gravitate towards them because then they can teach us mistakes or things we've missed much quicker than flicking through the rulebook and reading it all again. It's not really my preferred way to learn a game. I do prefer physically doing it myself rather than watch somebody talk about it, because again, it's the same premise as reading the rulebook. You've got them talking for 10-15 minutes solid about the game, talking about every intricate little feature and step and mechanism and walking you through it all. Yes, it might be compacted, it might be much easier to digest, but it's still going to be information overload. And I feel like if I try to learn a game that way, it might just be too much information all at once, that I'll just forget things. Exactly the same as if I just read the rulebook and try to remember it all just from one read. The worst method is obviously to say, yeah, let's get this game out and let's learn it. Don't do this. It's a terrible way to learn a game. There's a lot of pressure on you and your players to try and have some fun while you're playing the game, whilst you're trying to learn the game. I mean, if you're teaching the rest of your group and you've already learned the game, sometimes they might lose interest, look at the phone, they might dwindle off for a few seconds here and there when it's not their turn or you're explaining something to somebody else. But if you're all physically sat there learning the game together, you're going to very rapidly lose the interest of everybody at the table. And I can't imagine that that will go down very well with enthusiasm about the game. In my opinion, you must learn the game in advance. There's a few exceptions, obviously. If it's a small party game, the rules aren't going to be too heavy. If it's a little light game, little card game, it's going to be fine, okay? But if it's anything with any kind of depth or numerous mechanics or lots of components, learning it on the fly is not the way to go. It's a very bad style of learning a game. It's definitely not recommended. So I think that brings us to the end of this video. So in conclusion, there is no set path to how you should learn a game. It's all of these different methods and methodologies, they're all down to your personal choice. One that works for me might not work for you. But I do think for those who are new to the hobby and those who want to find a better way to learn, that learning the game physically at the table while you're reading the rulebook is the best way to play. Even if you're just playing a couple of turns, it's a better introduction to the game than just reading it and trying to retain it, or just following somebody's how to play without actually physically playing the game and identifying and learning all of the components, all of these different mechanisms, where these components go, how the turn structure plays. It's the best choice in my opinion. As I said before, it's not going to apply to every game. Every game is unique. Some might take you 2 minutes to learn, then literally might be a single page of rules. Other games might be complex and have whole rule books. So you need to choose the method that's best for you. But I do recommend this one as my personal choice, my personal favourite way to learn games now. Sitting down at the table with family, saying we're going to learn the game tonight, is honestly the worst way to learn. And like I said, it used to be my preferred choice, but that was a long time ago. Games have moved on since then. They're a lot more complicated, there's a lot more depth and a lot more mechanisms at play nowadays. So just saying that as the way to learn the game now is not a viable option in my opinion. You need to sit down before you sit down with your group and learn everything in advance. I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously share your opinions on this, because this is a very personal take on board gaming and how you would learn games. It's not going to apply to everybody, like I said. Everybody's different. Everybody's got their own opinions about how they play and how they learn games. So drop your comments, let other people know, and see if there's like a consensus. But I hope this has benefited some people, and I hope it does help some people learn their games in an easier way, in an effort to get them to the table. Because if you learn a game in the wrong way, let's say I did this with Twilight Imperium and I learned it on the fly, that would have been absolutely horrendous. That is a game I learned in advance, and I'm very glad I did, because if we'd have been sat there, my entire group, listening to me reel off rule after rule after rule of Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, good God, that game would never have been put on the table. I would have lost all of their attention immediately. So obviously it's personal take. Leave your comments, let other people know what you think, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Hit the thumbs up if you did. I'll see you next time.